Morning guys, we're back at it again with another video. So we are here in Wickenburg, Arizona. So what we're going to be doing here today is I'm going to be working with the Aquamate guys, and we are going to be installing a 50,000 gallon water tank. So the next size up from the tank that we installed at our place here. And you might be wondering to yourself, why are you out there doing a tank install like this? So I'm thinking of ways that I can still be in the trades and do projects and do contract work that is definitely in alignment with what I want to do. So rainwater harvesting is definitely really important to me. So I want to learn how to install these tanks. I really love these Aquamate water tanks. Obviously we've got one ourselves, but it's definitely something that I really want to get into when I finish building our house and I finish up all the stuff that I want to do inside the garage. After that, I'm going to start working on my own business, installing tanks like this. So I got to get the training. So we're going to be working with John, who you met in the other video. He came down from Georgia. These are going to be pretty cool. So we're doing a 50,000 gallon tank. That's what you're going to see in this video. They also have these really interesting anti-vortex systems so that when they do draw water out of it for fire suppression, it doesn't create a vortex inside of the tank. So we'll see how that's installed. And then they've got another 100,000 gallon tank that's going on another spot. You're not going to see that, but this is a big job site here going on. So we are going to get started, get working, and get this shit done. So believe it or not, there's not only a 50,000 gallon water tank, but also a 100,000 gallon water tank on that 20-foot trailer. It's incredible how big the tanks are and how small of a package that they actually fit into. The only exception is the roofing panels for it. Those are typically delivered separately, and they're quite long. But both of these tanks are being installed for fire suppression tanks at a new U-Haul facility in Wickenburg, Arizona, which is on the way to Vegas. If you're driving from Phoenix or Tucson to Vegas, you'll most likely drive through Wickenburg. And so we're installing a tank for them, and that is the majority of Aquamate's business. But I'm really excited to share this journey with you guys of starting my own business. Hannah and I have been self-employed entrepreneurs for the past almost 5 years now. So there is a lot that I've learned, especially on the back end, how businesses work. And there's going to be a lot of information that I will be able to share with you guys. If you want to start your own business, whether it's in the trades or it's just something that you're passionate about, there's going to be a lot of information that I can share with you guys to make the process maybe a little less intimidating, because I know it can seem kind of like there's just so much to running your own business that you might not even start. But what Brad and I have been doing is we're laying out all the corrugated panels that basically builds the majority of the tank, as well as all the uprights here. And what we're doing right now is we're fishing through some bolts from the inside and loosely attaching a nut on the outside. So we get everything kind of loosely in place with these tanks, and then at a later time in this video you'll see us cinch it all down once we get everything right where we want it. So in this video I'm also wearing some of my True Work gear. A little shout out to those guys for sending me some of that gear there. Really big fan of the high vis hoodie there, especially for working in the sun all day. I really like it just to keep the sun off my neck and keep it off my arms. It's very lightweight and breathable, and I think it's got like an SPF of 30. So we can see John's back in the picture now. He's joining us. He's just not going to be sitting around. He's getting out there and doing it. Even though he's like he's in sales, he really likes to get out there and work on the tanks and do some of the work himself, which is always really cool, because it does kind of get boring sitting behind a desk all the time. And one thing that I've always loved about the trades, and I'm a big proponent of the trades, is that getting out there and building stuff like this and seeing what you've accomplished at the end of the day is really satisfying. And that's one thing that I really enjoyed working when I was working as an electrician, is at the end of the day, it's like you see what you've done and you see that things are working and that you've done a good job with it, and the customer is happy. It's very satisfying. And I think that's one reason why I enjoyed working in the trade so much, is because of, getting out and doing something and building something. So when we get to the upper panels, it can kind of be a little bit tricky to get the holes in the panels lined up with the uprights. So actually Brad has a slightly different way of kind of getting everything lined up. He just uses a screwdriver and he just basically grinds the end off so he can kind of stick it through. In the other video on my water tank, there's a different tool that the guys used. I can't even remember the name of it, but yeah. You know what I mean if you watch the other video. Now that we've got the second layer done and we put a piece of liner around the bottom, we can get the third and final layer up. The customer, you saw him earlier in the video there, he was so impressed with how quickly the tank went up. At this point, we've probably been working for about 2 or 3 hours, and you can see the majority of the tank being constructed. So going around the top, we install these brackets which attach the upright support for the tank, and then on the inside there is a piece of 2-inch curved steel which provides a tremendous amount of support for the actual tank itself. So you can see us installing that with those brackets at the supports, and this is what the roof trusses sit on, and then the liner also goes over that as well. So you can see Brad here fishing through some of those bolts. And one thing with installing these tanks, one thing that you realize inside of the tank while you're installing it with all that reflective galvanized steel is that it gets hot. So you saw Brad double fisting the impact drills, and what it looks like on the inside is all you have to do is just hold the bolts up or just kind of push on them, and typically the nut will catch enough that it'll just cinch it right up. And then through all the seams going around the tanks here, we install some of this really sticky tape. So that basically prevents the liner from cutting into that edge there. So there's an edge obviously where the panels stack up. And so where all the bolts are, we install a piece of liner here that basically covers up where all the bolts, even though they are rounded and they aren't sharp or anything like that. You'll definitely notice that as much care is taken to basically prevent any leak from potentially happening. So the liner material basically, once the actual liner is in and the tank is filled up with water, it'll sit up against this and push up against the outer wall. So we want to make sure that there's no sharp edges or any sharp protrusions that could potentially put a hole in the liner, because that's definitely something that we don't want. We want the water to stay in the tank and not be leaking out of it. And you'll notice that Brad is leaving a lot of slack between those pieces of tape, installing that liner piece over the bolt holes, and that's just to give it extra slack. And it's basically when the pressure of the water is pushing up against it, the slack is good, because it's not going to rip or tear anything. So you'll notice that even with the liner installed, that there is a good amount of slack in it, and that's done on purpose. Now, definitely one of the cool features about this tank, and all the fire suppression tanks that Aquamate does, is this anti-vortex unit that gets installed in these tanks here. So the anti-vortex is it's pretty well the only type of fitting that needs to be installed or cut on the tank in the field there. All the other fittings, so your standard 2-inch fittings and the overflow, those are all cut into the tank, basically the tank panels beforehand. But this anti-vortex is actually made on site here. And that definitely just kind of speeds up the entire process of installing these tanks. The more that can be done beforehand and the less that you need to do in the field, definitely makes the job go a lot quicker. So Brad's got the nice Makita power nibbler. He's actually having some troubles with getting it going around the corrugations, mainly because at the bottom of this 50,000 gallon water tank, it's double, the steel's, it's twice as thick. So there's 2 panels instead of 1. So on my tank, there's only 1, but on these bigger ones, they beef up the bottom there. But he was able to get around there and basically drill out that hole for the anti-vortex. This will be fully installed when the liner is done, and so you'll see that in a second, but we got to get the liner in place, and that means that we need to get the trusses installed here. So the trusses are all just bolted together, and they attach to that piece of 2-inch curved steel going around the top. And basically from here, once we get all the trusses in place, basically the roof just goes together almost pretty well like any other standard steel roof. So it kind of goes together pretty simply in that sense there. And with some of these trusses, they're quite heavy, so having some of the extra hands on deck was really necessary. And the other two guys that you saw in the video with the trusses was Rick, who helped install our tank, and one of the guys that works for him, Joe. And so to finish off the first day, underneath the liner, above the bare soil, there's almost kind of like a piece of carpet that fits right across the bottom of the tank there, so that the liner isn't sitting directly on the ground there. So this is the start of the second day. So the guys are just laying out the liner right now, and you'll notice that they're not wearing their shoes while doing this. And anytime that you're working inside of the tank or working on the liner, you're not gonna wear shoes or anything like that, just because you just don't want to put any holes or any little nicks in it that could potentially cause any leaks. So once they kind of get it laid out, then they can start flipping the liner up over the edge of the tank there. And a lot of people, even on my tank install video, they're like, wow, that's a nice pool that you installed. And it really does. It really does look like it's just a giant above ground pool. And, you know, obviously there's a little bit more engineering that goes into something like this, but essentially, yeah, that's what it is. It's just a really expensive above ground pool. And I guess, you know, I've even thought about making videos of me swimming in our water tank because it's pretty well full right now, but we'll see. Brad also had a really unique way of providing shade over the tank while we're working on the roof and working inside of it, just using, I believe that's like 1.25 inch rigid conduit, and then a shade tarp on top there. And yeah, it worked really well. And especially when you're working on the roof and working inside of the tank, that extra little bit of shade, it definitely makes a big difference. So now Brad is installing one of the bulkhead fittings. So standard on these tanks, there's two 2-inch bulkhead fittings. One is kind of like a drain line, and the other is your kind of main water line there. But a lot of great care has to be taken with this, because this is the part of the tank that is most likely to leak. So that's where the experience and that's where the training definitely comes into play. So you can see how we stick it through and cut the liner, and then on the outside there's a kind of like a rubber gasket or washer, I guess you could call it, that fits up with the corrugations, and then a nut that goes over it. And many of you guys caught this on my tank install. And I believe Joe forgot about this when he was trying to thread it on, but this is actually a left-hand thread. It goes on backwards there. And yeah, even when I was I think when I was recording the video for my tank install, I'm like, oh damn, that's a left-hand thread instead of your standard right-hand thread. So this is probably one of the cooler parts of the install, is the anti-vortex kit here. So what this does is when water is being drawn out of the tank, and this is how it was explained to me. So as water is being drawn out of the tank, and say you just had a big hole in the side without this piece that is 90 down to the floor of the tank, is that it could create a vortex in there, and the water will be circling around in there. And so what the anti-vortex does is basically prevents that from happening. So with the anti-vortex push through, there's another kind of big rubber gasket that goes on the outside, and then there's a plate that goes over it that Joe was just drilling through, so that we can basically get the bolts through from the inside to the outside to go right through the liner there. So there's a little kind of like liner washer that goes on this side of the anti-vortex, and now we'll push the anti-vortex back through since we've got all of our holes drilled out. Basically, a lot of care is taken to make sure that this is perfect, because this is another area for potential leaks, and that's obviously something that we want to basically prevent. So Brad is working these bolts through, and then on the outside Joe is just fishing a nut on. And so this is kind of like installing a tire on your car. So in terms of how they tighten it down, it's just basically like the same kind of pattern in order to do basically this anti-vortex as it would be if you're replacing the tire on your car or the wheel on your car. So in this view here, you can kind of see how the water would be drawn up through the anti-vortex, and it sits on another separate piece of liner, so it's not sitting directly on the liner. And then here we go, the guys are just tightening it up just as if you're tightening up a car tire, and getting all those bolts really nice and cinched up with the impact. And then they go with just basically a big ass wrench and tighten it down just a little bit more. And so what Brad likes to do is add some marine gray caulk to where all the bolts are. Between the bolt and the anti-vortex itself, there is a washer there, but he likes to add that in there just to further prevent any leaks from happening. And that's the 2 standard bulkhead fittings that are installed on the tanks. Now we are on the home stretch here. We are just installing the roofing panels, and those go basically on top of the tank just like any other roof system does. So we screw down to all the trusses and to that 2-inch piece of steel that goes around the perimeter of the tank at the very top there. Now, one detail that I didn't get to show when installing my rainwater tank is that, and something that we're not installing for this one because it's not a rainwater tank, but through all the gutter pieces on our rainwater tank is that there are these little gutter pieces that we install so that the actual roof of the tank becomes a collection surface as well. And so that's a really cool feature of these tanks. With our system, with our main roof being I think it's 4,200 square feet or something like that, or it's 4,600 square feet. If you add the square footage of the roof of the tank, it adds almost an extra 10% to our collection surface, which is really nice. So now we've got a lot of overhang of the roof panels. So what we do is we basically make little notches from below the tank into the steel so that we know basically the cut line going around the tank. So you can see John doing that right now and just putting little notches in there just so that from above, when you're using the power nibbler, which you see Joe using right here, is that all you do is you just follow that line all the way around so that you get a nice curved, basically curved line going around the tank. And so here's some final shots. So yes, if you're in Wickenburg and you see that water tank, it's not an actual, or water tower, it's not an actual water tower, it's a cell tower, but you'll see our water tank right next to it. And you'll see a U-Haul facility probably within the next year or so being totally finished there. And the tank install went great, and the customer was very happy that it was installed in 2 days, and they said nothing in Wickenburg is ever installed on time, but these tanks go together really nice and quick, and they're very happy with it.
Gotta take a look around, make sure nobody's peeing over our mats anymore.
Yeah, a little Easter egg from the last tank install video that I did. I think it's when John and I were chatting, there was somebody taking a leak behind us. I didn't even catch that in video edit, but you know, it happens. Anyway, so we're here in Wickenburg, Arizona, and we're here with Mr. John again from Aquamate, installing a tank that is specific for fire suppression. So even on the last video, he mentioned that is the vast majority of the tanks that they sell are for fire suppression.
So we're out on a commercial site here, and I think he's done an aerial video, so you'll be able to see that. And this tank is a 50,000 gallon tank for an NFPA application. What they're doing with this tank is they have it high on a ridge, and it's going to have a flooded intake at the building below, and then they're going to have 2 fire hookups so the fire trucks can hook up to them and then pull the water and load their trucks in case of any fire. So they needed, by the county standards, they needed 50,000 gallons for this application, and we actually manufacture a tank that has exactly 50,000 gallon tank capacity, so it was perfect for this application.
Dude.
No more. Sorry guys.
No worries. We've installed this tank. It took us a day and a half actually. Might have been a little quicker if we had the roof metal closer to us, but everything went well on it. We had at the beginning of the tape, you should have been able to see, we have a 6-inch anti-vortex put into the tank. And I think Derek has explained the purpose of the anti-vortex.
Yeah, I'll explain it in the video, yeah.
Okay. So they have an anti-vortex hookup, and on anything that we put in that's 4-inch or larger, we'll put an anti-vortex on it. We can go up to 18 inches, 20 inches if we have to on larger tanks that we do. But about 90% of our applications are for NFPA installations like this. So I was telling Derek last night about a normal phone calls that I get. We get a lot of residential calls that people are either doing a small commercial project or a home and they're needing fire protection. And unfortunately, a lot of times people get caught off guard and they didn't know they needed fire protection until they either try to get occupancy or they're farther along down the lines. And that's usually when I get called, especially by a residential person. And a lot of times they're in a panic because they didn't budget for it. They didn't know it was going to be needed. And so when they give me a call, they're pretty well in a frantic mode because they've probably gotten some tank quotes and some proposals from people that have scared them to death. So normally when people are calling me, especially the non-commercial people, they're in a bit of a fluster because all they've been told is they need a fire tank. So if I could give any advice to anybody, nobody likes to talk to the county and get them involved, but you need to go back to the county people, the fire marshals, or whoever is over the NFPA standards, and they can give you a direction. A lot of times they'll do it just by square foot, and they can tell you you've got 3,000 square feet and you need 10,000 gallons. A lot of times they can tell you if you're going to need a pump for that application, or if they just need accessories to go onto the tank that the fire department can hook up. But hopefully if you give us a call, I can help steer you in the right direction.
So specifically with Aquamate, their tanks can come in like a fraction of the cost of something like a welded tank that's done on site. Just from some of the quotes that John has kind of heard through the grapevine through people that ended up buying with him, it was like a very small fraction. So definitely check them out. And if you need a fire suppression tank or a rainwater tank, then give this man a call. There'll be a link in the description box and in the comment section below. And really love these tanks, and